How do you defeat peer pressure, right? It's actually kind of funny. If you really think about it, peer pressure doesn't actually exist. The only way you could argue that peer pressure exists is if there's some form of violent threat towards you to do something, right? So, if someone is going to literally threaten you, then maybe you could argue that. But if it's not like a legit threat, then again, it's false. Then, a lot of you are peer pressured by society, right? Or people that you know, basically, right? And the peer pressure isn't even that many people. If you really think about it, at top, it's how many people, right? Not too many if you really think about it, right? Peer pressure doesn't actually exist, right? And the best way to defeat it is that no matter what you do, or whether you adopt the societal norms, right, or the norms of whatever the thing that is being peer pressured here, or you reject it, either way, these people are going to complain, right? Whether you listen to them, they're going to complain, and whether you disobey them, they're going to complain. So you may as well just disobey them, right? And it's not even that big of a deal, right? Like, for example, no amount of peer pressure can make me do gi-jitsu, right? That's another point, right? Or no amount of peer pressure would make me do something degenerate, for example, right? Like, I'm just not going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, and like the funny thing is, a lot of people will do things where the peer pressure happens, but because a lot of the times they don't necessarily have confidence in what they know. I won't even say believe what they know. Is they end up doing it just because of that. Just because they don't like that awkward sensation that happens, right? That awkward moment. Basically, they can't fathom that. So how do you defeat something like that? I mean, realistically, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, literally, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? Not a whole lot. Like, I mean, nothing's going to happen, right? They might look at you weird, or they might say something at best, but like, they can't really make you do anything if you really think about it, right? Like, peer pressure, and even a lot of the peer pressure is actually avoidable, right? If, like, for example, you have friends that happen to be losers, right? Or they just have degenerate tendencies, right? How do you, like, avoid being peer pressured into, like, let's say going into doing something that's degenerate, right? Like, for example, like drinking, right? Or smoking or whatever, right? You avoid it by seeing these people less. And I'm not even saying you have to necessarily cut them off, right? Like literally, I'm not going to be friends with you. You don't even have to say that. Just stop talking to them that much, right? Lower that, and then peer pressure isn't even there. So most peer pressure is actually avoidable, right? Most peer pressure, in a way, like I said, it doesn't exist, right? Like, if you put it in your mind that peer pressure doesn't exist, and it literally won't. Like, there's a saying in MMA, right, and in wrestling, and in a lot of martial arts, where the head goes, the body follows, right? So if you literally believe that peer pressure isn't real and that no one could force you to do something, right? Especially something wrong, right? Whether it's something degenerate like alcohol, smoking, drinking, jiu-jitsu, right? Any of that, right? Cocaine, heroin, like all that. If you literally believe that it's impossible and that it's not real, then by default, it's not going to be a problem. And unfortunately, because of this, you may have issues with, like, making friends. Or I shouldn't even say friends, but like, and like, in a way, that's kind of a good thing, because most people out there are not worthy of friendship, right? Like, if we're being honest here. And it's not necessarily just because they're evil people, not even because of that. It's just, They just have a weird lifestyle, degenerate loser lifestyle, which doesn't really make any sense. So, like I said, man, peer pressure isn't real, right? It's all literally in your head. It doesn't actually exist. Like, worst case scenario, nothing happens. Worst case scenario. You know what I mean? Worst case scenario, they say something. Like, okay. Oh, you're such a loser because you don't want to drink alcohol. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm the loser. Yeah, I'm the loser because I don't want liver problems and kidney problems and, liver failure and all this stuff and heart problems. Yes, I'm the loser, of course, right? And you notice this with a lot of, I don't know, people who have these tendencies, weed heads. And if you really think about it, not just weed heads, but people who drink and they just follow the norm, right? They're like a fish that goes with the current, right? But the fish that goes with the current does not achieve a whole lot. They actually end up getting eaten by the bear, right? So yeah, just keep that in mind, right? And that's the downfall of peer pressure, right? And why peer pressure, falling into that peer pressure, is dangerous. Because if you just crack in the slightest amount of pressure, right? Imagine this, right? You get peer pressured into drinking alcohol. You never drink alcohol, right? And now, because of that, because you got peer pressured by some friends, let's say, because of that, you end up developing a habit of alcoholism, for example, right? Because of that, now all of a sudden, let's say you pick up on an alcoholic addiction, you become an alcoholic, right? And now because of that, because of these alcoholic tendencies, what happens? Right? You get not just the health problems, right? Liver failure, heart problems, right? Kidney problems as well, right? There's a whole lot of problems, right? And depending on the alcohol, you can even get cancer too, right? That's also another one, right? And of course, infertility issues, all that stuff, right? So now, that's the health problem. That's your a personal problem, right? But even outside of just problems that you deal with, right now, a lot of alcoholics also tend to be abusive, right? And because they drink alcohol or whatever, they end up getting, more abusive and more abusive, right? So again, now you can't even maintain relationships, right? You probably have a harder time getting friends, right? Or any type of relationship. You might even lose your job because of how bad it is, right? You're hungover every weekend or maybe every day, depending on how bad it is. And it's all because you fell into some peer pressure. And this could be for anything, right? So do you really want to be that person that picks up bad habits and degenerate habits because of peer pressure? Probably not, right? So, like I said, don't be that person that falls into peer pressure. Because it doesn't actually exist, bro. I've said it time and time again, right? People are afraid of that awkward moment and that weird moment. But realistically, it doesn't actually exist, right? The only reason something is awkward is because you think it is. But if you think of those people that are socially unaware, for example, right? And even though it's not good to be that way to an extreme, right? Because then, they just act basically like a bunch of idiots, right? And that can't read the room, right? But if you think about those people, though, there's one good thing, that they don't believe in awkward moments, right? We all know a person that has no social awareness, right? He just talks loud and, he doesn't care about the room, right? Now, I'm not saying be like that 100%, but these people don't believe in awkward moments. And, what will this person think of me? They don't think of that. They are not, that's the one commendable thing I will give them, right? So in a way, you could pick up that one good trait from them, right? And awkward moments don't actually exist, right? So really think about that, man. Peer pressure if you fall into the peer pressure, it can ruin your life, right? And like, it doesn't even have to be that big of a bad habit. It could be something like, oh, like your friends want to go to, I don't know, like go to Wingstop or something. I don't know, right? So if you're always going to Wingstop, now you're wasting maybe an hour every day just going to Wingstop and eating with them over there, right? Or maybe you don't even eat; you just hang out, right? That you're maybe wasting an hour or two, right? And like, I guess, okay, look, the socializing aspect can be good once in a while, but there's more to life than just aimlessly talking about random stuff, right? So just think about that, right? Peer pressure is the wave, right? So you want to basically resist the wave. You don't want to be the fish that just follows the wave and then ends up crashing or ends up getting eaten by a bear, right? And in this case, the bear is metaphorical for, how do I say this? It's basically a metaphor for the degenerate habits, the example that I gave with the alcohol, right? So think about that, man. Like, you really don't want to do this, right? Like, peer pressure doesn't exist, but if you believe it exists, it will exist, right? But yeah, that's probably what I'm gonna end off with. That's just something I've been thinking about lately. I was just like, peer pressure, whether, and it's probably one of the many things I feel like I've always been good at is not folding to peer pressure, because it was like, I don't believe that people can make me do something, right? Now, I mean, you can be respectful about whatever, right? But yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you also have to stand for something. Like Malcolm X said, if you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. And then you have people. This is why they just follow the crowd and they fall for anything. They fall for, alcohol and drugs and smoking and like drinking, right? Jiu-jitsu, right? And even ideologically, they'll follow a certain political ideology just because of peer pressure, right? They may not even believe it, but it's just because peer pressure, right? So again, like that's what sheep are basically, right? Anyone that's a sheep is basically folding to peer pressure, right? And you don't want to be that person that folds to peer pressure, right? Yeah, but yeah, that's what I'm gonna end off with. Just remember, like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll keep the content coming.